Maria wiped down the last table at the diner, her feet aching after another double shift. It was almost midnight, and she still had to catch 2 buses home. But she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to complain, not when she had 2 kids depending on her for everything. The next morning came too soon. Her alarm went off at 6 and she dragged herself out of bed. Saturday, the one day she tried to give completely to her children. No matter how tired she was, no matter how much her body hurt, Saturdays belonged to Danny and little Rosa. "Mama, Mama, wake up." Rosa's excited voice came through the bedroom door. "It's park day." Maria smiled despite her exhaustion. Park day. It was the only entertainment she could give them, the only thing that didn't cost money. Just fresh air, open space, and time together. She made them breakfast with what little she had in the fridge. Eggs and toast. Danny, who just turned 8 last month, ate quietly. He was always the quiet one. Her thoughtful boy who seemed to understand more than a child should have to understand about their situation. "Can we stay at the park longer today?" Rosa asked, her 6-year-old eyes bright with hope. "Of course, baby. We can stay as long as you want." They walked to Riverside Park, about 20 minutes from their small apartment. Maria held their hands, one on each side, and listened to Rosa chatter about everything and nothing. Danny stayed quiet, but she could feel him squeeze her hand a little tighter when they passed by Jensen's bike shop. She knew what he was thinking. She always knew. When they reached the park, Rosa ran straight for the swings. Danny followed, but slower, his eyes tracking something else. A group of kids his age were riding bikes along the path, racing each other, laughing with that careless joy that comes from not having to worry about anything. Maria sat on a bench and watched her son watch those other children. Her heart felt like someone was squeezing it. She'd seen that look on his face before, want, longing, and underneath it, resignation, like he'd already decided that bikes were for other kids, not for kids like him. One of the boys on bikes zoomed past Danny, so close that Danny had to step back. The boy didn't even notice. He was too busy laughing, too busy having fun, too busy living the kind of childhood that Danny deserved but couldn't have. Danny walked over to her bench and sat down. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there watching Rosa on the swings. "Mama," he finally said, his voice so soft she almost didn't hear it. "Do you think, maybe someday, could I have a bike?" The way he asked it broke her, like he was asking for the world, like he was asking for something impossible. It was just a bike, just a simple bike, but for them it might as well have been a car or a house or a trip to the moon. She pulled him close, wrapping her arm around his thin shoulders. "Listen to me, Danny, I promise you I'm going to get you that bike. For your birthday next month. I promise." His eyes went wide. "Really, you mean it?" "I mean it, baby. I'm saving every penny. You're going to have your bike." She meant it too. She'd been planning it for months, taking on extra shifts, skipping her own meals to stretch the food budget. She had a hiding spot in her dresser where she kept the cash, adding to it bit by bit. $127 so far. She needed $150 for a good used bike from the community center, just $23 more. She'd get there. She had to. Danny hugged her tight, and for a moment everything felt worth it. The exhaustion, the hunger, the constant worry, all of it was worth this moment of hope in her son's eyes. "Go play with your sister," she told him, kissing the top of his head. "Go have fun." He ran off toward the swings, and she could see the difference in his step. Lighter, happier. Hope could do that. Hope could make a heavy world feel just a little bit easier to carry. Maria closed her eyes for just a second, letting the morning sun warm her face. These moments were rare. Moments where she could breathe, where she could feel something other than the constant pressure of survival. The sound of an expensive car engine made her open her eyes. A sleek black vehicle pulled up near the playground area, completely out of place in their neighborhood. The door opened and a man stepped out. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. His shoes were shined so bright they caught the sunlight. Everything about him screamed money. He was on his phone, talking loud enough that she could hear him even from her bench. "I don't care what the tenants say. Buy the building. They'll move eventually. They always do." He laughed, cold and sharp. "Trust me, these people don't have options. Make them an offer they can't refuse, and if they don't take it, we'll find other ways." Maria felt uncomfortable listening, but he wasn't exactly keeping his voice down. He sat on a bench about 30 feet away, completely oblivious to the families around him, the children playing. The whole world that existed outside his phone call. The Riverside district is sitting on gold, he continued. These outdated buildings, these stubborn renters, they're in the way of progress. We clear them out. We build something modern. We triple our investment. Simple economics. He talked about people like they were obstacles, like they were problems to be solved rather than human beings with lives and homes and memories. Maria looked away, focusing back on her children. Men like that lived in a different world, a world where money solved everything, where people were just numbers on a spreadsheet. She'd seen his type before. They came through the neighborhood sometimes, looking at buildings, talking about development and progress and improvement. What they really meant was pushing out people who'd lived there for decades to make room for expensive apartments and trendy coffee shops. Rosa called out to her. "Mama, watch me. Watch how high I can go." Maria watched her daughter pump her legs, going higher and higher on the swing, her laughter filling the air. These were the moments she lived for. Not money, not things, just this. Her children's happiness. Their laughter. Their hope. The man in the suit finished his call and sat there for a few more minutes typing on his phone. Then he stood up, got back in his fancy car and drove away without a single glance at the park, the children, the life happening all around him. Maria forgot about him almost immediately. She had more important things to think about, like the fact that she needed to pick up an extra shift next week to make sure she had enough for Danny's bike, like what she'd cook for dinner with the $5 she had left until payday, like whether Rosa needed new shoes because the ones she was wearing looked a bit small. When the afternoon started getting hot, they walked home together. Danny talked the whole way about the bike, about where he'd ride it, about how he'd take care of it. Maria listened, her heart full despite her empty wallet. That night, after she put the kids to bed, she took out her envelope from its hiding spot. She counted the money again, even though she knew exactly how much was there. $127. She ran her thumb over the bills, each one representing hours of work, sacrifice, skipped meals, $23 more. That's all she needed. 3 more weeks until Danny's birthday. She could do this. She would do this. She tucked the envelope back in its spot, way in the back of her dresser drawer, hidden under old clothes, safe, secure, or so she thought. Maria didn't know that in 3 weeks that envelope would be gone. She didn't know that the man in the expensive suit from the park had anything to do with her life. She didn't know that her world was about to fall apart in ways she couldn't imagine. All she knew as she fell asleep that night was that she'd made her son a promise. And she would keep it, no matter what it took. She had no idea how much that promise would cost her, or that the worst was yet to come. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Maria was at her cleaning job, scrubbing floors in an office building downtown, when her phone buzzed. It was Tom, her manager from the diner. "Maria, can you come in early today? I need to talk to you about something." Her stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with those words. "Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? Just come in when you can. We need to talk." She finished her shift in a daze, her mind racing through possibilities. Maybe they were cutting her hours. Maybe she'd messed up an order and someone complained. Maybe. When she walked into the diner that afternoon, Tom's face told her it was worse than she'd imagined. "Sit down, Maria." She sat. "The restaurant's been sold. New owners are bringing in their own people. Last day is in 2 weeks. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. The diner was her main income, her steady job, the one she could count on. Without it, she had just her cleaning gigs and the weekend shift at the grocery store. That wasn't enough. Not even close. "Tom, I need this job. My kids, I have to pay rent. I know. I'm sorry. I fought for you, for everyone, but it's out of my hands. Corporate decision. Building's being sold to some development company. They're tearing it down to build condos. Development company." The words echoed in her head. Just like that man in the park had talked about. Clearing out the old to make room for the new. She wondered if it was the same people. Probably. They seemed to be buying up everything in the neighborhood. She walked home in shock. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to figure out how to replace her main income. 2 weeks before Danny's birthday. The timing couldn't be worse. That night after the kids went to bed, she counted her money again. $127. She'd been so close. Now she needed that money for rent, for food, for survival. But she'd made a promise. Maria made a decision. She'd work harder. She called her cleaning supervisor and begged for more hours. She picked up 2 extra shifts at the grocery store. She barely slept, running from one job to another, fueled by coffee and desperation. Her body hurt constantly. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. But every time she wanted to quit, she'd picture Danny's face when she'd promised him that bike. She couldn't let him down. Not again. Not like his father had let them down when he walked out 3 years ago. The days blurred together. Work, kids, work, kids, sleep for 3 hours, wake up, and do it all over again. Rosa started asking why Mama was always tired. Danny stopped talking much at all, like he could sense something was wrong but didn't want to add to her burden. Finally, the day before Danny's birthday, she counted her envelope. $152. She'd done it. Despite losing her job, despite everything, she'd kept her promise. She barely slept that night, too excited to see Danny's face in the morning. She'd arranged with her neighbor to watch the kids while she ran to the community center first thing to buy the bike. She'd hide it at her neighbor's place until after breakfast, then surprise him. The alarm went off at 5:30. Maria got up, her whole body aching but her heart light. Today was going to be a good day. Today, she'd see her son smile like he deserved to smile. She made coffee and headed to her dresser to get the money. She pulled open the drawer, moved aside the old clothes, reached for the envelope. It wasn't there. Her heart started pounding. She pulled out all the clothes, throwing them on the floor. She checked under the drawer, behind it. She tore apart her entire dresser. Nothing. The envelope was gone. No, 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 no. She was on her knees, searching frantically, hoping maybe she'd moved it and forgotten. But she knew. She knew exactly where she'd put it. Someone had taken it. Mama? Rosa's small voice came from the doorway. Why are you crying? Maria hadn't even realized she was crying. Baby, did anyone come into Mama's room? Did anyone touch Mama's things? Rosa's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry. What happened, Rosa? Tell me what happened. Through tears, Rosa told her. A man had come to the door yesterday while Maria was at work. He said he was from the landlord's office, said he needed to check the apartment for repairs. He showed Rosa a badge, looked official, seemed nice. He said I was being very helpful. Rosa sobbed. He went into all the rooms. He was only here for a little bit. I didn't know I did something wrong, Mama. I didn't know. Maria pulled her daughter into her arms, even though inside she was screaming. It's not your fault, baby. It's not your fault. But who was it? Who would steal from them? And how did they know where she kept her money? She called the police. They came, took a report, asked questions. But without any real description of the man, without any evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Ma'am, we've been getting reports of similar robberies all over this area. Someone's been posing as building inspectors, maintenance workers, utility company representatives. They're targeting single mothers, elderly people, anyone vulnerable. We're investigating, but these people are organized, professional, stealing from people who had nothing. After the police left, Maria sat on her bed, staring at nothing. $152. It seemed like such a small amount to someone with money, but to her it was everything. It was months of sacrifice. It was skipped meals and extra shifts and exhaustion. It was her son's birthday. It was her promise. Danny appeared in her doorway. He was holding the homemade card she'd made him, trying to smile. Happy birthday, baby. Where's the bike, Mama? She couldn't look at him, couldn't see the hope in his eyes that she was about to crush. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Something happened and I don't have the money right now. But soon, I promise. Soon. The silence was worse than if he'd cried. He just nodded like he'd expected this all along. Like deep down he'd known that good things didn't happen to kids like him. It's okay, Mama, he said quietly. I didn't really need a bike anyway. He went back to his room and Maria heard his door close softly. Not a slam, not anger, just quiet acceptance of disappointment. and that broke her heart more than anything. She made his favorite breakfast. She tried to act happy, tried to make the day special. But the whole time she felt like a failure, like she'd let down the one person who depended on her most. The weeks that followed were even harder. Without her diner job and without her savings, she fell behind on rent. The landlord, who'd always been reasonable before, suddenly became pushy. He wanted her out, said he needed the apartment for renovations. Maria started seeing changes in the neighborhood, more buildings being sold, more families moving out, more for sale signs and construction notices. One evening she saw a flyer taped to a lamppost. Tenants' rights meeting, fight back against Riverside Development Corporation. Find out how they're pushing you out. She tore off the flyer and took it home. Maybe this meeting would have answers. Maybe someone there could help. Rosa was having nightmares now, crying about the man who'd come to their door. Danny had stopped talking about bikes completely, had stopped talking much at all. He came home from school, did his homework in silence, went to bed. Maria felt like she was watching her children lose something precious. Their innocence, their hope, their belief that the world was fair. She looked at the flyer again. The meeting was tomorrow night. She'd have to pay her neighbor to watch the kids, money she didn't really have, but she'd go. She had to understand what was happening to their neighborhood, to their lives. As she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, she thought about the man in the expensive suit from the park, the one who'd talked about clearing people out, about making them move. She wondered if he had anything to do with all this. With the robberies, with the building sales, with everything falling apart. It seemed impossible, too big, too organized. But then again, 3 months ago, she would have said it was impossible for someone to walk into her home and steal everything she'd worked for. Nothing seemed impossible anymore, not in this neighborhood, not in her life. She turned over and stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. 52 days since Danny's birthday. 52 days since she'd broken her promise. 52 days of watching the light fade from her son's eyes. Tomorrow she'd go to that meeting. Tomorrow maybe she'd get some answers. She didn't know yet that the answers would be worse than she could imagine, or that the man in the expensive suit was about to become the center of her nightmare. The community center was packed. Maria had never seen so many of her neighbors in one place before. Old Mrs. Chen from downstairs, the Rodriguez family from 2 buildings over, people she recognized from the grocery store, the bus stop, the park. All of them looked tired. All of them looked worried. She found a seat near the back and waited. A woman at the front was setting up a projector, and a younger man with a notebook was talking to people, writing things down. "Thank you all for coming," the woman said, her voice cutting through the nervous chatter. "My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I'm a community organizer. This is David Kim, an investigative journalist who's been looking into what's happening in our neighborhood." The journalist stepped forward. He looked serious, like someone carrying heavy news. "For the past 6 months, I've been investigating Riverside Development Corporation. What I've found is disturbing, and I think many of you are already living through the consequences." He clicked a button, and a face appeared on the screen behind him. Maria's breath caught in her throat. It was him. The man from the park, the one in the expensive suit. "This is Robert Chen, CEO of Riverside Development Corporation. He's worth approximately $3 billion, and he's systematically destroying this neighborhood to make himself richer." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maria leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Riverside Development has bought 47 buildings in this area over the past year," David continued. "They're using a strategy that's legal on paper but deeply unethical. They buy buildings, raise rents dramatically, claim buildings need major repairs, and force tenants out. Once buildings are empty, they demolish them and build luxury condos." An older man stood up. "That's what happened to my building. They said it needed a new heating system, raised my rent by $800. I couldn't pay. I had to leave." "Exactly," David said. "But it gets worse, much worse." He clicked to the next slide. It showed a map of the neighborhood with red dots scattered across it. "These are reported robberies over the past 8 months. Notice anything?" Maria stared at the map. The dots clustered exactly where the new development signs were, where buildings had been sold. We believe Riverside Development is behind these robberies. They hire people to pose as building inspectors, utility workers, or maintenance staff. These thieves target the most vulnerable residents, single parents, elderly people, anyone unlikely to fight back. They steal whatever cash they can find. Why? Someone shouted. They're already rich. Why steal from people like us? David's face darkened. 2 reasons. First, every dollar they steal is one less dollar you have for rent. It makes you more likely to miss payments, which gives them legal grounds to EVI. Shoo. Second, it creates fear and instability. A neighborhood with high crime rates is easier to justify tearing down. Property values drop, which means they can buy more buildings cheaper. The room erupted in angry voices. People shouting, crying, demanding answers. Maria sat frozen, her mind putting pieces together. The man in the park, Robert Chen. He'd been talking about buying buildings, about clearing people out. And then weeks later, her money disappeared. Her building was sold. Everything connected. I was robbed, Maria heard herself say. Her voice was quiet, but somehow everyone heard it. The room went silent. She stood up, her legs shaking. 2 months ago, a man came to my apartment, said he was checking for repairs. My daughter let him in. He stole everything I had saved. $152. She heard her voice break but kept going. I'd been saving for my son's birthday. I worked 3 jobs. I was skipping meals to save that money. I promised him a bike and I couldn't keep my promise because someone stole it. I thought it was random. I thought it was just bad luck. David was writing in his notebook. When did this happen? What address? She told him. He checked something on his laptop and nodded. Your building was purchased by Riverside Development 3 months ago. The robbery happened exactly 2 weeks before the new management sent out rent increase notices. Maria felt dizzy. It wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. Someone had deliberately destroyed her son's birthday. Someone had planned it, organized it, profited from it, and that someone was a billionaire who wouldn't even notice $152. How can he get away with this? Someone demanded. Why isn't he in jail? Because proving it is hard, Jennifer said. The thieves are careful. They don't leave evidence. The connection to Riverside Development is circumstantial. That's why we need your help. We need testimonies. We need details. We need enough evidence to take to the police and the media. I have something, Mrs. Chen said. She was the elderly woman from Maria's building. The man who came to my apartment, he dropped his phone. I found it after he left. I kept it, thought maybe someone would claim it. David's eyes lit up. Do you still have it? In my apartment. I can get it. That could be the break we need. If we can trace that phone to Riverside Development employees, we have proof. More people started sharing their stories. The Rodriguez family had been robbed the same way. So had the Johnsons, the Patels, the Williams family, all of them in buildings now owned by Riverside Development. All of them targeted when they were alone, vulnerable, trusting. I want to go public with my story, Maria said. She surprised herself with the words, but once they were out, she knew it was right. I want people to know what he did. What he's doing. David looked at her carefully. Are you sure? Robert Chen has powerful lawyers. He could come after you. I don't care. He stole my son's bike. He stole my daughter's sense of safety. He stole my ability to pay rent. If I stay quiet, he wins. I can't let him win. Other people started volunteering too. An elderly man who'd been robbed of his late wife's jewelry. A single father who lost his rent money. A young woman who'd had her laptop stolen. The one she needed for online college classes. They all had the same story. Someone official looking. Someone with a badge or uniform. Someone who seemed trustworthy. And then money gone. Safety gone. Stability gone. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, David had testimony from 17 families. He had Mrs. Chen's phone to analyze. He had documentation of the pattern connecting robberies to building sales. This is going to be a big story, he told the group. But I need you to be prepared. When this goes public, there will be backlash. Riverside Development will fight back. Are you all willing to see this through? Everyone nodded. Maria felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Anger, yes, but also determination. After the meeting, David pulled her aside. Your story's powerful, Maria. A mother working multiple jobs, saving for her kid's birthday, having it stolen by a billionaire's scheme. That's the kind of story that makes people pay attention. When will you publish it? I need to verify a few more things, maybe a week. But when I do, your name will be out there. Are you ready for that? She thought about Danny, about how quiet he'd become, about Rosa's nightmares, about all the families in this room who'd been hurt the same way. I'm ready. Over the next week, David interviewed her multiple times. He verified her timeline, checked her building sale records, confirmed the robbery report with the police. He was thorough, careful, making sure every fact was solid. He also traced Mrs. Chen's phone. It belonged to a man named Tony Rodriguez, who worked for a company called Metro Property Services. And Metro Property Services was a subsidiary of Riverside Development Corporation. The evidence was there. The connection was clear. We're going to publish tomorrow, David told Maria on Friday evening. I wanted you to know first. By tomorrow afternoon, this story will be everywhere. Maria barely slept that night. She kept thinking about what would happen next. Would anyone care? Would anything change? Or would Robert Chen just hire better lawyers and keep destroying lives? The next morning, she got her answer. Her phone started buzzing before she even got out of bed. Text messages from people she hadn't talked to in years. Emails, calls. David's story had gone viral. Billionaires, theft ring, how Robert Chen stole from the poor to build his empire. The article had everything. The testimony from families, the connection between robberies and building sales. Mrs. Chen's phone traced back to Riverside Development, and right at the center of the story was Maria's account of saving for her son's bike. By noon, the story was on national news. By evening, protests had started outside Riverside Development's corporate offices. By the next day, lawyers were calling Maria, offering to help. Robert Chen issued a statement denying everything. His lawyer sent cease and desist letters. His PR team called the story fake news, but the evidence kept mounting. More victims came forward. A former Riverside Development employee gave an anonymous interview confirming the strategy. Security camera footage surfaced showing one of the fake inspectors entering a building and leaving with a bulge in his jacket. The truth was coming out. Finally, after months of suffering and silence, people were listening. Maria watched it all unfold, feeling something between hope and terror. This was bigger than she'd imagined. Bigger than her neighborhood. This was about every person who'd ever been pushed out, stolen from, or treated like they didn't matter. And it had started with $152 and a broken promise to a little boy who just wanted a bike. The letter arrived on Tuesday morning. Thick, expensive paper, law firm letterhead. Maria's hand shook as she opened it. Cease and desist. Defamation. Legal action. The words blurred together, but the message was clear. Robert Chen's lawyers were threatening to sue her for everything she'd said in the article. They claimed she'd damaged his reputation, hurt his business, spread lies. She called David immediately. They're going to sue me. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't fight this. Don't panic, David said. This is what they do. They try to scare people into silence. But you told the truth, Maria. Truth is a defense against defamation. And you're not alone. He was right about not being alone. By that afternoon, 3 law firms had called offering to represent her for free. A legal defense fund had been set up online and had already raised $30,000. People across the country were donating, sharing her story, expressing outrage. But knowing she had support didn't make the fear go away. Maria had never been involved in anything like this. She was just a mom trying to survive. And now she was in the middle of a legal battle with a billionaire. The media attention intensified. News crews showed up at her building. Reporters called constantly. Someone created a hashtag about her story and it started trending. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about Maria Torres and Robert Chen. Some people supported her. They called her brave, a hero, someone standing up for the little guy. But others were cruel. They said she was probably lying, trying to get money, using her kids for sympathy. The anonymous comments online were vicious. Why doesn't she just get a better job? One person wrote. Stop having kids you can't afford. Reading those comments hurt more than she expected. These people didn't know her life. Didn't know how hard she worked. Didn't know what it felt like to choose between food and rent. But worse than the online cruelty was what it did to her children. Kids at Danny's school had seen the news. Some of them asked questions. Others made fun of him. Your mom's on TV because she's poor, one boy said. Danny came home that day and went straight to his room. When Maria tried to talk to him, he wouldn't open the door. I wish you hadn't said anything, he said through the door. I wish you'd just let it go. Baby, I did this for you. For all the kids like you who, I didn't ask you to. His voice broke. I just wanted you to forget about the bike. Now everyone knows our business. Everyone knows we're poor. Everyone's talking about us. Maria stood outside his door crying silently. She thought she was doing the right thing. But maybe she'd just made everything worse. The next blow came from her landlord. An eviction notice. He claimed she'd violated her lease by allowing media crews near the building, by causing a disturbance, by damaging the building's reputation. This is retaliation, Jennifer from the community group told her. They're trying to punish you for speaking out. We'll fight it. Everything was piling up. The lawsuit threat. The eviction notice. Her son's anger. Her daughter's nightmares getting worse. Maria felt like she was drowning. And then a recording surfaced. David called her, excitement in his voice. Maria, you need to see this. Someone recorded Robert Chen at a private dinner 3 months ago. It's him talking about the displacement strategy. We have him on tape. The recording was damning. Robert Chen, surrounded by other wealthy investors, casually discussing how to force poor people out of their neighborhoods. These people are sitting on valuable land. His voice said clearly, they don't understand what they have. We can't just pay them fairly. That cuts into profit margins, so we make them desperate. We make staying impossible. Eventually, they leave on their own, and we get the property for nothing. Someone asked about the ethics of it. Robert Chen laughed. Ethics? These people barely pay taxes. They contribute nothing to the economy. If anything, we're doing society a favor by moving them somewhere cheaper. They should thank us. The recording went viral immediately. It was one thing for people to suspect what he was doing. It was another thing entirely to hear him say it out loud with such casual cruelty. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Companies that worked with Riverside Development started cutting ties. Investors pulled out. Protests grew larger. Politicians who'd taken money from Robert Chen suddenly found themselves answering uncomfortable questions. Maria watched it all from her tiny apartment. Still terrified about the eviction notice, still worried about her kids, but now seeing that maybe, just maybe, speaking up had mattered. The legal battle intensified. Robert Chen's lawyers filed their lawsuit. Maria's pro bono legal team filed a countersuit. More victims joined the case. What started as one mother's story became a class action lawsuit, representing 73 families. The police investigation, which had been moving slowly, suddenly accelerated. With the recording as evidence and multiple witnesses coming forward, they arrested 5 people who'd worked as fake inspectors for Riverside Development. One of them, facing serious jail time, agreed to testify against Robert Chen. He admitted everything. The organized theft ring, the targeting of vulnerable residents, the direct orders from Riverside Development Management. He had emails, text messages, payment records, everything. The trial became national news. Maria had to testify. She sat in that courtroom. Robert Chen's lawyers trying to make her look unreliable, trying to pick apart her story. They questioned her finances, her parenting, her decisions. Isn't it true you had a history of missed rent payments before the alleged robbery? One lawyer asked. I missed rent once, Maria answered, keeping her voice steady. Because my daughter was sick and I had to choose between rent and taking her to the doctor. I chose my daughter. Isn't it possible you simply spent the money and made up the robbery story? Maria looked directly at Robert Chen. He sat there in his expensive suit, face blank, like this was just another business meeting. I worked 3 jobs, she said. I skipped meals. I did everything I could to keep my promise to my son. And your client had someone break into my home and steal it. Not because he needed the money. He's a billionaire. He did it to make my life harder so he could profit from my building. He stole my son's bike so he could build condos. The courtroom was silent. My daughter has nightmares because she let a stranger into our home. My son barely talks anymore because kids make fun of him at school. Your client didn't just steal money. He stole my children's sense of safety. He stole their childhood for what? So he could be a little bit richer? One of the lawyers started to object, but the judge held up his hand. Let her finish. I have nothing, Maria continued. No savings, no security, no guarantee my kids will have a home next month. But I have the truth. And the truth is that men like your client think people like me don't matter, that we're just in the way, that our lives, our struggles, our children, none of it is real to them. Well, we're real, we matter, and I'm not going to stay silent about what he did. When she stepped down, her legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk. But she'd done it. She'd told her truth. The trial lasted 3 weeks. More victims testified. The evidence piled up. Robert Chen's defense fell apart piece by piece. When the verdict came in, Maria was at work. She couldn't afford to miss a shift even for this. Her phone buzzed with texts, calls, messages. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. Robert Chen was convicted of fraud, theft, conspiracy, and a dozen other charges. He faced 5 years in prison and millions in restitution payments. The judge's statement was scathing. The defendant used his wealth and power to systematically exploit the most vulnerable members of our community. He demonstrated a complete lack of empathy or moral conscience. This sentence reflects the seriousness of his crimes and the harm he caused. Maria sat in the break room at work, reading the news on her phone, and cried. Not tears of joy exactly. The damage had been done. Her savings were gone. Her kids were still struggling. The eviction notice was still pending. But at least there was justice. At least Robert Chen would face consequences. At least her voice had mattered. That night when she got home, Danny was waiting for her. He'd seen the news at school. For the first time in months, he hugged her. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered. "I'm sorry I said I wished you hadn't spoken up." "You were right." Maria held him tight, both of them crying. "I just wanted to keep my promise to you." "I know. And you did. Just not the way either of us expected." The restitution check arrived 6 months after the trial ended. $152 plus additional damages. The total came to almost $8,000. Maria stared at the check sitting at her kitchen table. $8,000. It was more money than she'd ever had at once. It could solve so many problems. Overdue rent. Rosa's shoes. The coat Danny needed. Food. Actual groceries, not just rice and beans stretched to last all week. She could finally buy him that bike. But when she went to the bike shop, something felt wrong. She stood there looking at the bikes, and all she could think about was that it had taken a trial, media attention, and national outrage for her son to get something that other kids got without thinking twice. Danny was with her. He'd grown in the past year. He was taller, quieter, older somehow than 9 should be. "Pick whichever one you want," she told him. He walked along the row of bikes, touching the handlebars, checking the wheels. He was careful, methodical. Finally, he stopped at a blue one, decent quality, on sale. "This one's good, Mama." "You sure? You can get a better one. We have the money now." He shook his head. "This one's perfect." They bought the bike. The shop owner threw in a helmet for free, said he'd followed Maria's story in the news. They walked home, Danny wheeling the bike beside him. At the park, Maria expected him to want to ride immediately, but he just sat on the bench next to her, staring at the bike. "What's wrong, baby?" "I thought getting the bike would feel different," he said quietly. "I thought I'd be really happy." "You're not happy?" "I am, but also I don't know. It feels weird. Like it came from bad things happening. Does that make sense?" Maria's heart broke a little. Her 9-year-old son shouldn't have to think like this. "Yeah, baby. That makes sense." She watched him finally get on the bike and ride. He was careful, slower than the other kids. She could see him concentrating hard, like he was afraid something would go wrong. There was no carefree joy, no wild laughter, just serious focus. That night, a journalist who'd been following the story called. She wanted to do a follow-up piece, see how Maria and the other families were doing after the trial. "How do you feel now that it's over?" the journalist asked when they met for coffee. "Do you feel like justice was served?" Maria thought about it. "Robert Chen's in prison. I got my money back plus more. The stolen money got returned to all the families who were hurt. So yeah, I guess justice was served. But," the journalist heard something in her voice. "But he didn't just steal money," Maria said slowly, working out thoughts she'd been carrying for months. "That's what everyone focuses on. The dollar amounts. The restitution. But that's not what he really took. What did he take?" Maria looked out the window of the coffee shop. A mother was walking by with 2 small children, all of them laughing about something. "He stole time," she said. "He stole my son's 9th birthday. I can't get that back. Danny will never have the memory of being surprised with a bike on his birthday morning. Instead, he remembers it as the day his mom couldn't keep her promise," she continued. The words coming faster now. "He stole my daughter's sense of safety. Rosa used to open the door with a smile when someone knocked. Now she's terrified. She checks the locks 5 times before bed. She has nightmares about strangers in our home. She's 6 years old and afraid in her own apartment. And for you? He stole my belief that working hard matters. I did everything right. 3 jobs. Saved every penny, sacrificed everything, and it meant nothing. Someone with more money and more power just took it. What's the lesson there? That trying doesn't matter? That the system's rigged? That's a terrible thing to learn. The journalist was writing quickly, but you fought back. You won. I fought back and it almost destroyed us, Maria said. The legal battle. The media attention. Danny getting bullied at school. The eviction scare. We survived, but we're not the same people we were before. We're harder now. Less trusting. More afraid. Do you regret speaking up? No, Maria said firmly. But I wish I hadn't needed to. I wish Robert Chen had just been a decent human being. I wish the system protected people like me instead of people like him. I wish my kids could have stayed innocent a little longer. The article came out a week later. It was different from the first one. Less about victory, more about the real cost of what had happened. It talked about trauma, about how poverty isn't just about money. It's about stress and fear and loss of dignity. Maria received dozens of messages after it published. Some people criticized her for not being grateful enough. You got your money back, what more do you want? They wrote, but others understood. Other mothers, other people who'd been through similar things. They shared their own stories of systems that failed them, of doing everything right and still losing, of watching their children grow up too fast because the world was too hard. The money from the restitution didn't last long. Maria was more stable now, but still struggling. She'd managed to keep her apartment, but just barely. The kids needed things. Life was still expensive. $8,000 seemed like a lot until you realized it covered maybe 6 months of basic expenses if you were careful. But something unexpected happened a few months later. The community center called. They'd received a large donation from someone who'd followed Maria's story. The donor wanted to create a program and wanted Maria to run it. What kind of program? Maria asked. A bike workshop. Teaching kids how to fix and maintain bicycles, providing free bikes to families who can't afford them. The donor said your story inspired them. Maria almost said no. She barely had time as it was. But then she thought about Danny, about how that bike hadn't brought him joy the way she'd hoped. Maybe this could give it meaning. Maybe this could be how she turned something terrible into something good. She started the program on Saturdays. Parents brought bikes that needed repairs. Maria learned alongside the kids, watching YouTube videos, figuring things out together. Danny and Rosa helped. Slowly, Danny started smiling more, showing younger kids how to adjust their seats, helping them learn to ride. One Saturday, a little girl came in with her mother. The bike was old, rusty, barely working. Maria recognized that look on the mother's face. Tired, stretched too thin, trying so hard. We found this at a yard sale, the mother said apologetically. It's not much, but it's what I could afford. It's perfect, Maria said. We'll fix it up. Make it like new. She and Danny worked on that bike for 2 hours. New chain, fixed brakes, cleaned and painted. When they were done, it looked amazing. The little girl's face lit up. Pure joy, uncomplicated happiness. The kind Danny should have had. What do I owe you? The mother asked, reaching for her wallet. Nothing. It's free. Just promise me you'll bring her back if it needs more fixing. The mother's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You don't know what this means, but Maria did know. She knew exactly what it meant. As she watched that little girl ride away, wobbly and laughing, Maria felt something shift inside her. The bitterness she'd been carrying started to ease just a little. Robert Chen had stolen something from her family. Something real and painful and impossible to fully replace. But maybe she could make sure other families didn't lose the same things. Maybe that was how you survived trauma, not by pretending it didn't happen, but by making sure it meant something. That evening, Danny was quieter than usual as they cleaned up the workshop. Finally, he said, Mama, I'm glad you spoke up about what happened. Even though it was hard. I think you helped people. You think so? Yeah, that girl today, she was so happy. And we did that. Because of everything that happened, we got to do that. Maria pulled him into a hug. When did you get so wise? I learned from you. Walking home that night, each holding one of Rosa's hands, Maria thought about everything that had happened. The theft, the trial, the aftermath, the pain that still lived in quiet moments, in Rosa's nightmares. In the way Danny sometimes got very still and sad, Robert Chen had stolen her children's innocence. He'd stolen their sense that the world was fair, that hard work mattered, that promises could be kept. Those were losses that money couldn't fix, that justice couldn't restore. But maybe, in some small way, she was stealing something back. Not for her own kids, exactly. That innocence was gone. But for other kids, other families. Each bike they fixed, each child who learned to ride, each mother who got help when she needed it most. That was its own kind of justice. Quieter than a courtroom, smaller than headlines. But real. Rosa squeezed her hand. "Mama, can we do the bike workshop every Saturday?" "Every Saturday," Maria promised. And this time, she knew it was a promise she could keep. They walked the rest of the way home together, three people who'd survived something hard and come out different, but not broken. Healing wasn't about going back to who they were before. It was about building something new from the pieces that remained, and maybe that was enough. Maybe that had to be enough. Because in the end, the real theft wasn't just about money or bikes or birthday promises. It was about hope. And hope, Maria was learning, was something you could lose and find again. Lose and find again. Over and over. It was hard work. Harder than any job she'd ever had. But it was worth it. For Danny. For Rosa. For the little girl on the rusty bike who'd ridden away laughing. For every person who'd ever been told they didn't matter and refused to. Believe it, that was what Robert Chen had really stolen. And that was what Maria was determined to take back. One Saturday, one bike, one promise kept at a time.